Great. So what we'll do is we'll be running through an introduction to Lightroom. We'll be focusing mainly on Lightroom Classic, but we'll also be covering a bit of the differences, what's the differences between Lightroom and Photoshop, the subscription options, how you can import images into Lightroom, how to organize your images, file management, etc. And also how you can synchronize settings. And then we'll be handing over to Anne-Marie to talk through some of her techniques around editing, and then how to export your finished images. So what we'd like to ask people is if they can use the chat to ask questions. We will have a little pause throughout this, session, so people have an opportunity to ask some questions and unmute and so forth, but just to kind of keep the recording as clean as possible for other people who might be joining later or watching the replay. Cool. Actually, I'll take this. There we go. Great. So let's crack on with today's session. So first things first, what are the differences between Lightroom and Photoshop? So I guess really the key difference from my perspective is, we use both. We're a photography studio. We're based out of London in the UK, but we use Lightroom and Photoshop for slightly different things. I mean, certainly Lightroom is a great place to organize your images. So I looked in our catalog, which is our main catalog that we work from for, which we've been running since the beginning of 2020, and we've got just under 21,000 images in there. So as you can imagine, because of the sort of volume of shots we do and shoots we do, trying to manage those without having a database to do that would be a real problem. So using something like Lightroom, which is essentially probably primarily an image management system, an image database where you can sort your images via things like metadata, etc., makes it really easy for us. Also, it does allow you to do quite a lot of editing. We say basic, but it is pretty powerful. And probably one of the nice things about it is, we shoot in RAW. So, our images come as raw images out of the camera. Because we're using those raw images, we've got the best possible quality of image to work with. So we can actually do quite a lot with images if they're slightly under or overexposed, or the white balance and things like that aren't correct. I also in the studio shoot tethered. So I shoot with Sony cameras, other brands are available. But one of the nice things about shooting tethered, especially in the studio environment, is you can get to see the images come up as you go along on a nice big screen. You can make adjustments and so forth. So if you're shooting portraits and so forth, it means that you've basically got a better chance of getting it right first time. If you shoot with Nikon or Canon cameras, you can actually tether directly from Lightroom. So not only do you get the benefits of having your images going into the catalog straight away, but you also obviously get the ability to see those images and so forth, and make adjustments even to the camera settings. So that's one great advantage of Lightroom. But if we go on to the difference, say, between Lightroom and Photoshop, probably my next slide gives us a few overviews. Like we see, Lightroom is great for image management, simple editing, searching by metadata, things like even location, if you've got GPS data in your images, and this non-destructive editing of your RAWs. Whereas Photoshop is great for much more complex editing tasks, where you want to, say, use layers or masks to composite images together. Photoshop actually also does support a really wide range of other media. So you can do video, you can do vector graphics. I think somebody's on the phone here. You can do design work, illustrations. You can use it for digital painting, very advanced retouching. There are also a range of editing plugins that are available with with Photoshop, which aren't available in Lightroom. And also for things like pre-press work, you've got the ability to output to CMYK, which is used a lot for printing. So when we're printing things for our business, like our business cards or our flyers or our brochures, we will typically output those as CMYK files. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about the differences, I've got a handy link in here. We'll just bring that up on screen if people are interested. And like I say, we'll be sharing a copy of the PDF copy of the slides, but Adobe themselves do have quite a nice little chart here, which kind of gives you an overview of the differences between the two applications there. So as I mentioned, we use Lightroom Classic. The main reason we use Lightroom Classic is it's great if you basically want to store your images locally. So you have your own hard drives or SSD drives that you're storing your images on. It can obviously manage a massive catalog of files. Like I say, we've got just under 21,000 in ours. And, to be brutally honest, that's nothing really. I want to say that's nothing, or rather that's not unusual for in a professional photography environment. And again, especially with the pandemic, it probably would be double the size if we'd have been open as per usual. But in the Lightroom Classic workspace, the key things to pay attention to, where's my mouse gone, is up here is your list of modules. So library, develop, those are the ones we'll really be focusing on today, just due to the time we've got this afternoon. But there are other modules such as map, which allows you to import and manage map data. So you can manually import map data, or if you've got a GPS enabled camera or module that adds GPS to your images, that's another way you can use that mapping data to have extra information about your images. There's a book module, which allows you to basically produce photo books. You can lay out your photo books directly in Lightroom, pick your images, all that kind of good stuff, and then upload them to online services like Blurb and have your photo books printed directly from that proof that you've created in Lightroom. There's a slideshow module, which again allows you to create your own slideshows of images, from your catalogs and so forth. And print and web. Print we do use quite a lot. So when we're either self-printing or for tasks like where we just want to make something as simple as, say, a PDF of a contact sheet. So if you've done a bunch of shots and you just want to have a contact sheet to, say, share with a client or their agent or something like that, that's the print module allows you to do that. You can just print to a PDF, for example. And web allows you to upload images directly to an FTP server or your website. So that can give you some really handy ways of managing your images. So if we actually go into Lightroom very quickly, I'm just in the import module here. So just to show you, this is the library module. Let's come up on screen, okay? So from the library module, I can see things like my folders. So these are where my images are physically stored. So I've got them stored on an external SSD. Here are the collections I've made. Here are other options here. So I can actually publish to other sources. So uploads directly, say, to Flickr or Adobe, or again, publish to external hard drives, etc. I can use my import and export buttons here to pull, to obviously import and export images. And here is my sort of main viewer. So here we've got things like the grid view. We've got the loop view, which basically shows you a single image at a time. We've got XY comparison, so you can see, compare two images against each other. We've also got a survey module. So this allows you to basically look at images based on, say, different metadata attributes. And we've also got people. So this is where you can set up face detection. Is there a question?
There is. Someone's asking, are you going to share your screen? Is the screen being shared?
Oh, I thought my screen was being shared. Apologies.
It is being shared.
Oh, okay, great. Excellent. Thanks for that, Mark. Just double checking. But there will be a recording. So if anybody has had any issues seeing the screen sharing, we'll obviously make sure that, they can view the recording. So thanks for confirming that, Mark. Awesome. So where were we? We were in the library module. So other things in the library module, if we actually click on a specific image here, you've got some basic development options, and actually click on the image. There we go. So if we click on an image, we've got some basic develop options here. We can see the histogram. We can see things like how the white balance settings are as standard, as shot versus, using, say, our own or selecting a white balance option, etc. And we've also got the ability to view things like our keywords. So keywords where we can apply keywords. So I could have keywords, say headshot or male, female, London, anything that basically for me is a relevant way of tagging that image. Could be the camera I used, Sony camera, the lens, any of those kind of things. And metadata is the information about the file itself. So here we've got the file name. In fact, one thing you can do from here is actually rename images. So a great example of this was we were doing a job where we were doing ID badges for a large company. And what we needed to do was link the name of the person to the file name. So obviously my camera is just going to give them a generic file name, but here I could ask them what image they liked specifically. And when they told me, I could type their name in here, and then I knew all of those images, and I could also star rate them as well. All those images with a star rating, and the names, person's name in them was the selected image they wanted to use for their ID badge. We can also put in things like copyright information in here, and we can also capture information like the dimensions of the image, if we've cropped it, what the cropped image is, and the metadata of things like the type of exposure that was used, the focal length of the camera, ISO, flash information, the lens used, all of that stuff. So all that stuff is readily available to you directly here from the library module. So let's go back to our slides and let's talk about how people can buy or get access to Lightroom. So these days, Lightroom is available only as a subscription model. So think of it like Netflix, for example. You pay a fixed fee, and that would be for just Lightroom by itself, about £10, $10 a month. They also have photography plans, and the photography plans give you access to Lightroom and Photoshop. So like I say, as we use both of those products together, that's a pretty good way to start. And there are basically two options. One option where you have 20 gigabytes of storage, and that's cloud storage. So it has nothing to do with the storage if you're using your local hard drive or SSD drive to store your images. This is just so you can upload images for sharing. And also if you are using the ability to edit images that are stored online if you're traveling. So that can be quite a useful feature for photographers who travel a lot. But one thing I will draw your attention to, if you go for the Lightroom only option, you do get more storage. So you get the 1 terabyte of online storage, but you get the online only version or cloud only version of Lightroom. You don't get Lightroom Classic. And for me, I'm a little bit old school. Lightroom Classic, in my opinion, gives you more control over your image editing. And you've also got the catalogs, which are for us as a working studio, a great way to manage our images. So I prefer to have access to Lightroom Classic. So, that option for me would be a bit of a non-starter. But, you do have access to things like Adobe Portfolio across all of these. And Adobe Portfolio is quite a cool service. If you haven't got a website for your photography at the moment, basically, this gives you that portfolio place to store your images. You can have your own domain name linked to it, all of that good stuff. So that's pretty cool. In fact, it might be on my next slide, but I can show you my website that I've set up, or my portfolio website. If I bring up my browser, sorry, give me 1 second, folks. Here we go. It's canvasphoto.com. So although we have a business website, LDN Photography, I also set this up just as like a personal website where I could share some of my favorite images. Here's some of my street photography stuff. Here's some portrait photography, etc. So the nice thing about this is, like I say, it's included in my Adobe subscription. So as long as I'm paying for Adobe, I've got access to this particular, website. And like I say, it's really simple. It's drag and drop. I can put any kind of stuff in here that I like. And it's just a nice, simple way to set up a quick and easy portfolio website. And like I say, it looks pretty decent. I mean, as all these things, you know, if you're into your web design, other applications or other solutions, maybe something like Squarespace or WordPress, which is what we use for our business websites, give you more functionality. But you know, this is, like I say, a good way you can have a website up and running in half an hour that looks, you know, pretty clean and pretty straightforward and easy to use. And like I say, that is part of your Adobe subscription. So that's the pluses of it. And the minuses, as with all these things, if you pay Adobe, you have a website. If you don't, oh, sorry, you have access to Lightroom. If you don't, that access is cut off. And the other thing to understand is with these plans, you can install your Adobe subscription on up to 2 machines. So they could be a PC and a Mac, which we used to run for a while, or it could be 2 Macs, 2 PCs. But if you then install it on a third, you basically have to deactivate it on one of those. So you can kind of there's a bit of flexibility there. But for us as a working studio, we have about 3 or 4 different machines that are running Lightroom and Photoshop. So basically, what does that mean? I have 2 subscriptions. So that's something to consider. The other thing to bear in mind is there is a plan called the Creative Cloud, which gives you pretty much all of the Adobe suite. So that includes things like Adobe Premiere, Acrobat Pro, Illustrator, InDesign, a whole bunch of stuff. If you know, obviously, if you have a requirement for those applications, that's, you know, basically everything, but that is about £50 a month, $50. So obviously that's something to budget for. So like I say, the photography plan is probably where most people start. Lightroom and Photoshop, $9 a month. There's a version with extra storage, and also there's Photoshop only. And like I say, when you kind of compare the different options, then, you know, work with the one that works for you. The other thing to also mention is there is an option for students and teachers. So if you are in full-time education, you can get about 60% discount on the all apps version. I don't think there's any discount on the photography bundle, to be fair, but that's something to look into. And again, we've got a link here with these prices are current as of yesterday when I last checked. But you know, you can obviously go on the Adobe website for the most recent info on how to buy and what to buy. So if you haven't got Lightroom, first things first, again, there's a free trial. If I click on the link here, Adobe do give you the option to try it for free for a week, which is quite decent of them. So again, if there's anything you see here that you want to try out yourself, feel free, grab a trial and give it a go. There is also a 20% discount at the moment. So this is, I believe, off all of the suite, all of the options there. And that ends on the 19th. We, as in, you know, disclaimer, you know, we as LDN Photography do have an Adobe affiliate link. So if you are interested, please check that out. If you go on our website, you'll see under our studio hire section, there is a link to Adobe. So if you are interested, click on that link. And like I say, it helps us out. It helps us obviously pay for some of it to do these types of events. But again, no obligation. Feel free to get Adobe in whichever way works best for you. So on to, have we had any questions coming on chat?
Yes, we have from Greg. He asks, in your workflow, do you name your folders and keywords before, after importing?
That is a very good question, Greg. So as I generally shoot tethered, when I'm actually capturing my images, I'll set up a naming convention there and then. But you almost read my mind. I'll show you another trick that you can use. when you're importing images, which really help with that. When it comes to keywords, I hate to say it, I'm a little bit lazy. I generally don't keyword my images, but what I do is, the collections that I'll set up will basically relate to the job or relate to the person or so forth. So that is essentially my way of organizing them. But to be fair, when we have done some large jobs before, one of them was shooting a beauty pageant, and we had to distribute images to loads of different people. Then I use keywords quite extensively. So yes, that does come in quite useful as part of the workflow. But again, that is a post import option in general. But I'm glad you mentioned that, because that leads in very nicely to what we're about to cover now. So how do you import images into Lightroom? So basically, this is the import screen. So this you access from the library module. And essentially, one of the key things to bear in mind is, depending on where you're bringing your images from, and when I say where you're bringing them from, if they're coming from an external drive or an SD card, i.e. the card out of your camera, then typically by default, Lightroom gives you this copy option, which is kind of makes sense. Essentially, it's leaving the images where they were in their original source drive or SD card. But then when you pull them in, it will store them on your preferred location in Lightroom, your preferred drive, be it external or internal drive. But those, essentially you're taking a copy of that image. Now, one thing, which again, thanks Greg for your question, you can do is you can rename your images. So where's my mouse gone? So here, this is something that is quite useful. And I do if I'm pulling images in from an SD card, and I'll come on to why in a second. The other thing to keep an eye on is actually where your images are going to. Because one of the first things, and again, we'll talk about this in a minute, when I first started using Lightroom is great. I can see my images in Lightroom, but, from a file management standpoint, I kind of had no idea where my pictures were. So this kind of gives you that idea where your pictures are going to go to. So let's do an import, and, I'll show you how that works in practice. So first things first, from the library menu, click on import. So I've got a couple of options here. In fact, I'm using my camera here as for a webcam. So I've got a very expensive webcam today. So a couple of options. It's asking me where do I want to pull my images in from. So no name is my SD card. So we'll click on that, and then we'll open the DSIM folder. And we'll go into the actual folder that my camera stores my images in, and you can see a whole bunch of images here already. So I'm going to import these images here. So these ones, as you can see, have got my camera default naming convention in. So typically what I'll do, especially if I've got a folder or a source that's already got some other images in, and I just want to import a specific job, is I'll go to uncheck all, and then I'll select the images I specifically want to import. So I just want to import a few of these. So I will click on one of them, and I'll use Command or Control if you're on a PC, and select the images I want to import. There we go. So we'll just go with those ones for now. Now, all I've done at the moment is highlight those images. I've not told Lightroom that I want to import them. So I just hover over the checkbox in the corner, or tick box, and now those highlighted images will be imported. So only these images will be imported. Now, the other thing I'll draw your attention to is you'll see these other images here. I can see them, but they're grayed out. So whereas these other images down here are not grayed out. So why is that? So basically what I can do is, if I select this option here, do not import suspected duplicates, these grayed out images here are showing me that they've already been imported. So there you go. So that allows me not to import things twice. So in fact, I should have switched over first, because now these are the actual images I want to import. So let me select those ones. There we go. Sorry for the humming. So those are the images I'm going to import. So now because I'm just going to import these specific images, I want to check or double check where Lightroom is going to put them. So it's going to put them in my external drive. It's going to stick them here in this folder structure. So that kind of grayed out arrow is telling me where it's going to put them. So it's going to put them in my 2021 folder. And there we go. Those images will be the ones that are imported. The other thing that we can do is we can also tell Lightroom that we want to rename them. So let me find that option again. There we go. Rename, file renaming. And I want to rename them because, like I say, my camera has this default naming convention. So I want to rename them something that's meaningful for me. My template is basically what I want to rename them to. So you could have date and file name, but I want to have a custom name and I want to keep the original file number. So those last 4 digits there, which are like the sequence these were captured in, I want to keep that, but I want to change the name. So the custom name that I want to use is, and now I've selected that, it gives me a box here, I can type that in. So the custom name will be Painting with Light. And we did this on the 14th. I'll put 14th October, for example. So now if I go ahead and import those images will come into my catalog here. That's great. And what you'll find is what Lightroom does is by default, it's going to put those images in this list here, which is previous import. So one, that tells me that those 10 images I've just imported are there. So if I decide to, if I get distracted or do something else, I can always go to previous import and it will show me where they are. The other thing I can then do is I can add those to a quick collection. So a quick collection is basically just a simple way of grabbing a bunch of images and kind of putting them in a placeholder, a collection that you can do stuff with at a later date. So I've already got an image in there, which sometimes does happen. So best practice, go in your quick collection, clear it first, assuming obviously that's not an image you want for this particular purpose. And now what I'm going to do is click on one image, do a Command A or Control A if you're on a Mac to select all my images. And then I can press the B button and B adds those to the quick collection. So now those images are part of the quick collection. So what I could do is I can save that quick collection, and that allows me to basically put all of those images or create a collection. So here I can say quick collection. And as the saying goes, here's one I created earlier. So I actually have got a Painting with Light collection, but I haven't actually got any images in it. So if I go to my quick collection here, I could, by selecting all of these images again, so that's Command A, I can drag, and this is the tricky bit, to drag a bunch of images into a collection. You actually have to click on the image itself or the image thumbnail, not the boundary or the border. So if I grab that, you see they've now got this kind of pile of pictures. I can drag that here into my Painting with Light collection. So that is how you import images. Another thing to bear in mind, and I'll just show you this very quickly, is because as I said before, those images were coming from an external source, this no name drive here. So it's automatically doing a copy. If I was picking up images that were already on my drive. So let's say, for example, I open my Extreme drive and I've got some pictures here and I've called them missing images, and I'll come back to that in a second. If I wanted to import these again, I would, by default, add is the best. It will probably give you the add option. Now, what add means is it will add those to your Lightroom database, your catalog, but they won't by default be moved. So that's something to be careful of, because sometimes you can end up with pictures in the wrong place and so forth, and you don't know where they are and how they got there. So that's something to bear in mind. Great. So I'm conscious of time. So that hopefully gives you a nice, easy overview on how to import your images. A couple of other points as well. You can create a second copy. So let's say I've got 2 drives, like one is my working drive, but maybe I've got a backup drive that's attached to my machine, or maybe just a local internal storage. You can create a second copy. So that means when you import, basically it puts a copy of those images in two places. I generally don't go that far, but I do take regular backups of my work drive. And as I'm also capturing to an external drive as well, I've kind of got 2 copies of my images by default, but I also want to have at least 3 copies. So one would be the working copy, the original file that I captured, and the third would be a backup. It's also a good idea to have backups in 2 places. So luckily we've got stuff at home and stuff backups we keep at the studio here. So, that's a good rule of thumb, basically the 1, 2, 3 rule. So you want, at least 1 different type of media. So not the same disk. You want to have this in 2 places, and ideally you want 3 copies of all of your work, all of the work that's important to you. So that's something that in my day job life, I work in IT, and I used to work for a backup vendor. That was basically our golden rule, the 3, 2, 1 or 1, 2, 3 rule. So bear that in mind. Great. So let's talk a little bit more about catalogs. So what is a catalog? So the catalog is basically the database of your images. And when I say the database, 1, it tells you where your images are, what you've done with them, things like your metadata, all of that good stuff. But it also stores any changes that you make to your images in Lightroom. So any adjustments, changing the exposure, all that good stuff. The cool thing about the way Lightroom works is it's non-destructive editing, which basically means your original raw file, your image file, is left untouched. But when you apply a change to that file, such as you, again, change exposure, change the white balance, any of that kind of stuff, it's stored essentially as a set of instructions to Lightroom on how to display that image, and then apply those changes or those settings when you export the image, say to a JPEG or a PNG file or a TIFF file or whatever you do with that image in the end. So the great thing about that is, like I say, your original file is never really touched. If you crop it, the original file still is the original file. The downside is, if you lose that catalog or it gets corrupted, all of those changes basically get lost. So that is a bit of a challenge. So typically, we'll show you in Finder here. If I pull up Finder, oops. So here in Finder, that's my external drive. If I go into that folder, which is my Lightroom Workshop folder, this is the actual Lightroom file. This is .lrcat file. You can tell Lightroom to back it up, which is a very, very good idea. And then here are my image files. So if I open here, here are my raw files. So these are the raw files that Lightroom has imported and stored in its data structure, and allows me to actually have access to my original images. So here we go. There's all of my original images. Now, I'll draw attention to one other thing here. You've probably noticed in some places, I've got these XMP files. Now, those are something that are called sidecar files. And I've got a slide on it in a second. But basically, the nice thing about these files is they are another way of storing those changes. So you don't have an XMP file until you do something to a file. But basically, that list of instructions, the changes to white balance, cropping, all that stuff, can also be stored here in an XMP file, the star ratings, the flagging, any of that stuff. And the nice thing about that is, if you ever lose your catalog file, you can at least get a good percentage of that information back. You could re-import those images. Lightroom will build a new catalog, read in those XMP files, etc., and give you, like I say, a good, kind of 80% of the information back. The flip side of that is XMP files slow Lightroom down a little bit. So depending on how powerful your computer is, how much memory and how powerful the processor is, you may notice Lightroom is a little bit slower. But in my estimation, it's probably a price worth paying. But again, that's something to consider. Whoops. So next thing I was going to show you is, again, some of the settings. So to understand how your catalog set up, if you go into the Lightroom Classic menu, go to catalog settings here, you can tell Lightroom how frequently to back up the catalog. Now, by default, it's something like a month. There is obviously the never option. As you can imagine, I would highly recommend you don't have never. But we actually set it for every time Lightroom exits, which can be a bit of a drag, especially when you've got you know, a sizable-ish catalog. You know, like I'll say, as is about 21 working Lightroom catalogs, about 21,000 files in it. So it might take a minute, 2, 3 to actually save those changes, especially depending on the amount of work you've done, and close Lightroom. So that's something to bear in mind. But the positive is Lightroom is constantly backing up the catalog. So, you know, for us, and me specifically, having had a catalog corruption issue in the way this passed, this obviously gets around that. The other option you've got, like I say, is this XMP file setting that I mentioned. So that's also something that's worth considering. So let's have a quick look at that actually in Lightroom. So let's get out of the import option. So if I go into Lightroom, like I say, it's here under catalog settings. So here we've got it set by default to once a week, because I just set this catalog up for the sake of today's session. So I'm going to change that to every time Lightroom exits. So if I quit Lightroom now, it will say, hey, do you really want to quit? Yep. You can obviously turn that off as well. And now it's going to save and back up the catalog. And like I say, for a smallish catalog, it's about 500 images. Doesn't take, you know, it doesn't take too long at all. So if we fire Lightroom back up, the other option, like I say, I mentioned, is the option for the XMP files. So again, we'll go back into catalog settings, and that's under metadata here. And like I say, we can say automatically write changes to XMPs. So as you can see here, here are some images that we just imported recently. So if I go in here and I make some changes, maybe I'll change the white balance to auto, or maybe I'll crop the image or something along those lines. As soon as, you know, well, Lightroom is constantly saving those changes to that XMP file. So if I have a look in that folder, in fact, let's prove the point. So if I go into that folder now, that will be this one here. We should start seeing, there we go. There's the XMP file. So there's the date and timestamp that it's created just because I made that one change. So like I say, that's something to bear in mind. So like I say, depending on how powerful your machine is, you know, it's a negligible impact on performance, but you know, it's something to consider. Great. So the other options, by the way, are if you have a couple of catalogs that you switch between, there's the open recent, so they'll be available to swap between. And then if you actually want to start from scratch, which again, I wouldn't say is necessarily best practice, but probably every couple of years as a working studio, we do that. Mainly just because, to be brutally honest, our SSD drives just get full. So we started like with a half terabyte SSD when we first opened the studio a few years ago per year. That got to a 1 terabyte SSD. Now we're at a 2 terabyte SSD for storing our stuff in. So like I say, we kind of archive those every year or so. So for us, that's probably the main driver for kind of having a new catalog, if not every year, every 2 years. But depending on the amount of images you shoot, you know, that may or may not be a problem for you. But if you go in here, that's how you can basically create a new catalog. It'll ask you what you want to call it, where you want to save it, and away you go. Great. So that's a lot of chat about catalogs. So on to file management, or as I euphemistically call this section, where the hell are my files? Because like, as I mentioned previously, when I first started using Lightroom, that was the thing that kind of confused me. I was used to using other image tools where, you know, it would kind of tell me or ask me, where do I want to put physically, where do I want to store my files? Whereas kind of Lightroom kind of does it for you, which is kind of helpful, but also is a little bit confusing. The other thing to bear in mind about the way Lightroom works is the database basically is king. So it knows where your images are. So what does that mean in practice? If you want to physically move a folder, so let's pop into Lightroom and I'll kind of give you a bit of an example about that. So if I look at my folders down here, I've actually seemed to have two 2020 folders, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense. So let's say this 2020 folder here, and let's go into Finder to see where that is. So I've got this 2020 folder here that's got some intro to Flash images here, but I've also got some 2020 stuff here, and that's to me kind of messy, and I don't like that. So part of me in the old days would just grab that folder from Finder, stick it in here, and I think, great, that's perfect. It makes sense to me now. But if I do that, Lightroom doesn't know I've done that. So that is going to mess up things for Lightroom. But the good thing is Lightroom can actually do that for me. So remember here, I've got that, that's the setup we've got now. I could grab that folder in Lightroom and move it into there. And it will give me a warning to say, you're about to move stuff on disk. Is that what you want to do? And I'll say yes. And then now it's done that as far as Lightroom's concerned. But now if I actually look in Finder, it's actually done it for real on the drive, which is great because it means that, you know, Lightroom knows where my files are and I can use Lightroom to manipulate and manage my folder structure. So again, same here, you know, that's there, don't like it there, I want it here, you know, I drag and drop it and everything's good. So that's the thing to bear in mind. If you're moving files around, make sure you use the folder option here in Lightroom to do it. Same if you're moving files from one drive to another. So let's say I got to that point where my Lightroom storage was full up. You know, maybe I was using Lightroom on my local drive and it was full up. I didn't want to start again. I didn't want to mess up my catalog, but I could grab my folders here and put them on a folder that was on an external drive or a bigger external drive or whatever I want to do. And then if I do it that way, Lightroom knows I've done it, all's good. But sometimes things don't kind of go to plan. So for example, if I go here into my intro to Flash folder or my intro to Flash catalog, and I go in the develop module and I look for my images, I start seeing things like file could not be found. And that basically means some images have been moved. So these ones are fine. These are okay. But these ones where file cannot be found, things like the history, there's no data there. The history doesn't know because the files have gone missing. So how can I fix that? Well, the good news is because the Lightroom's got a database, it knows it can tell me what the file names are, which kind of gives me a bit of a clue. So I could, like I say, if I go into these files and I look for, say, 1030, 1030, 1034, those kind of stuff, I could have a search around on my drive. So if I go in here and I search for, say, 1030, oops, and I look on my, there we go, it should, aha, it's giving me a clue. It's found a file. As you can see, I kind of cheated a little bit. I made a folder here called missing images. So if I know where these images should be, so they should be, and I can tell if I go into one that's not missing, I can right click here and I can go show in Finder. So that tells me where those images should be. And I've kind of found my missing files, whoops, by doing my search. So if I go into that missing files folder, I can drag and drop these back to where they should be. And hopefully Lightroom, have a little think, and as if by magic, everything's back to where it should be. My files are where they should be. I can edit them now. I've got all my histogram data back and all my metadata. If I go into let's get rid of that. If I go into the library module, I've got all my metadata back. So that's the good thing. I've managed to find my files and I'm happy again. So I've been in that situation. In the old days, you used to get an exclamation mark, but now it gives you a little bit more information saying files can't be found. So that can be a way around that. And again, that's another reason it's great to try and keep regular backups of your files, or the files that Lightroom has stored. Because at least that way, if I had deleted the raws, the database knows what I've changed in there. I can go to an earlier backup, pull those raws back into where they should be, and everything's back to normal. So again, being in that situation, this is one way of fixing it. And finally, when it comes to renaming files, as we've said, so this is a model we work with called Shanty. If I want to call that Shanty image, oops, I can make that change here in the library module. And again, if we look in Finder, we should see, there we go, Shanty image. So that's, oops, apologies, Shanty, I spelt your name wrong. So now those changes that I've made in Lightroom have been automatically or instantly reflected on the actual physical files, in the XMP files, and all that kind of good stuff. Great. So that is our session on managing your files. The last few bits I'd like to cover are organizing your files. But before I do that, any questions?
No, there was an earlier question asking how long the slideshow and talk will be available for reference.
Great question. We will stick it on our YouTube. So as long as YouTube keeps going, yes, it will be available. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. But yeah, like I say, if you have any difficulties getting hold of it, we'll probably go through, make sure the recording's okay, and we'll get this up and loaded or uploaded in the next couple of days. And we'll obviously email anybody who participated a link for that. Awesome. So back to the slides. So organizing your images. So when it comes to organizing your images, probably the key things is collections. And collections, we've kind of covered a little bit of this, so this will be pretty brief. Essentially are the way that you organize your images. For us, we typically will organize them based on the type of shoot. So here we did some headshots. This is just some pictures of clouds. We've got, our workshop, this is today's workshop. So these are all the images that we've got for today to work with. Here's some of the local pumping station, which is next to our studio and supplies water for the neighborhood. Typically that's how we'll organize things. Like I said, probably the key thing to kind of understand, or the key distinction, is folders are where the actual files are. So the stuff in your folders is most likely, if you organize your files in the same way we do, the same kind of stuff or the same content as in your collections. But collections are a way of making meaningful ways to manage, or meaningful collections of your images, meaningful, some meaningful structure to that. You can also create things like collections of collections, and the way you do that is if you right click here, you can either create a smart collection, or the other option you can do is, and I'm trying to find it now. You can create, that's it, I remember now. It's here. You can create a collection set. So let's say, for example, I wanted to create a collection set for workshops. I can go in here, create a collection set, and I can call it workshops. And now that collection set, I can put collections in there. So we did our Lightroom workshop, which is today. I can drag and drop that in there. We did painting for light, which we did on Thursday. I can put that into workshops. We did our intro to flash photography, which was last year's workshop. We can put that in there. So now I've put a bit more structure to the way my collections are set up. So that's kind of useful. Another way you might want to do it is based on years. So you might have this year's stuff versus last year's stuff. Or if you're a landscape photographer, it might be oceans versus mountains versus lakes. You could basically use this as a great way to set up your collections. The other thing you can do is create a smart collection. So a smart collection is a collection that might be based on the attributes of your images. So let me give you a quick example here. So let's say I wanted to have a collection that had, where are we? Metadata. Let's see. So that's ratings. Let's say I wanted to use some camera information. So let's say I wanted to have a collection of all my images that were a certain model of camera. So if, oops, I type in something like, I'm going to do that again. There we go. Where's the model of my camera? There we go. I've got everything that's that model of camera. So I can make that smart collection. And it's going to be camera is, and it's an ILCE-7RM3. Oops. So if I create that collection, now all of the images that I've ever created with that camera are in that collection. Now, how I can kind of show you what that basically means is if I go to all images, and up here in library, I can look by metadata. I can see that I've got two cameras in here. I've got an unknown camera and my ILC 7RM3 camera. And there were 468 images taken with that camera. And if I look at my smart collection, oops, guess what? It's the same number of images, he says. Where is it? There's my smart collection gone. There we go. So that's the smart collection I made, which was my collection by camera with 468 images in there. So, you know, smart collections, like I say, you can go to the nth degree of granularity. You could use them, you could use keywords, you could use lenses, all that kind of interesting stuff. But the nice thing is, because it's basically using a rule, every time you add an image that matches the criteria for your smart collection, it will be added to that collection. So that's something to bear in mind. Personally, I don't use smart collections much, but it is useful to, like I say, there could be some times in the future where that could be useful for me. Let's say your keyword, let's say you're doing facial recognition. So if I set up facial recognition here, like I say, if I set that up, it could, so it's picked up two different faces here. Like I say, I could create a smart collection to say everybody or every image that's, say, Shanti, or every image that's Georgia, or every image that's Anne-Marie, or every image that's Mark. So, you know, that can be quite a useful little feature. I hope this doesn't take too long, because I probably shouldn't have done this now, but that's the great thing about doing a workshop. Excellent. So let's go back to our slides and let's see if there are any questions.
Yes, there is. From Greg, asking some brilliant questions. Is a collection a copy of photo with a sidecar, or just a sidecar file associated with a photo?
That is a really interesting question. So my understanding is that a collection is basically your data, your way of segmenting the images that are in your catalog into something that's meaningful for you. So a a sidecar file basically just stores the attributes of the picture. So it wouldn't necessarily know what collection that image is in, but it does know things like what you've done to the image, i.e. changes you've made to the exposure or cropping or things like that. So I don't know if that exactly answers your question, Greg, but that's my understanding of it. So the collection and the sidecar files are kind of different, but I suppose the positive is by using the collections in Lightroom, at least it means you're in control of organizing the images into something that's meaningful for you. So I hope that helps. Great. So on to the last bit that I'll be covering before I hand over to Anne-Marie and give her some time to do some editing, which is synchronizing settings. So what's the importance of that? So we've imported images, we brought them into a collection. What I often do, or what we often do, is we'll find, say, a chunk of our images might be done with a certain lighting setup. And to be fair, with kind of any time we import images, we often need to just adjust things like the exposure a little bit, or the white balance a little bit, or apply lens correction. And again, that's one of the nice features of Lightroom, is that especially with the subscription model, it's constantly being updated. So all the latest lenses are in there. When new cameras come in, probably within a month or so, there'll be an update to Lightroom, so the new cameras are in there. And because all of the cameras and the lenses kind of have their own little differences in the way they'll take an image, lens correction especially is quite useful, because it just takes away the tiny little imperfections in the lens to give you the best possible image. So let me show you quickly how we use that. So this is a great example. So let's say I look for an image that we took of Georgia, and have I got filters off? Yep, great. And ratings off. So normally what we do is when we take an image in the studio, is we'll use something called a color checker. And the color checker is basically a way of capturing the a sort of reference that you can then use for setting things up like your white balance. And for the life of me, I can't find it at the moment. Where is it? It's got to be here somewhere. I shall cheat a little bit, and I'll use the one that Anne-Marie will be using in a second. Where are we? This is what happens when I start moving my files around, doesn't it? There we go. There we go. Great. So there we go. Typical. I see it now. Where's it gone? Can you see it, Anne-Marie? I saw it just now. There we go. Can't see it for looking. My bad. So it's probably because I'm doing that thing in the background. So basically what I would typically do, and let me just reset this for the sake of discussion. So this is the image as shot. So, the tone's not bad, but a few things aren't 100% right. So first things first, what we'll do is we'll use the dropper tool here. And I can't remember the name, which Anne probably will remind me in a minute. And that allows me to basically pick a white balance from something in the image. So typically, like I say, we use the color checker, but you could just use a gray card or one of those little pop-up gray, standard grays, and then we'll use that to adjust the white balance. So as you can see, the tone hopefully has gone a bit more neutral. Now, the other thing that I will do is we'll apply lens correction. So like I say, Lightroom has a database of all of the standard settings of our camera. And there we go. I just couldn't see it for looking. So we'll apply or remove chromatic aberration, and we'll apply profile correction. And I don't know if you noticed there, the image just kind of adjusted slightly. So if I use the / key, you'll see the difference. So that's without, that's our shot, and that's the adjusted image. So what I can then do is I can use that. If I use a command to select another image, say this one next to it, and we can synchronize settings. So I'll click on sync here, and then I'll pick which things I want to synchronize. So I want to synchronize white balance, and I want to synchronize lens correction. The other thing that I forgot to do actually was I may also want to adjust the exposure a little bit. So if I went in here, I could also adjust the exposure a little bit, maybe make it tiny touch brighter, etc. And then now, if I do that sync, it will copy those settings from here to this image over here. So if I click synchronize, that will happen.
Excuse me.
Okay.
I think you clicked the
Wrong way round.
Yeah. So if you go back into the sync, press sync.
Yep.
So you didn't click lens correction.
I didn't. Thank you.
Or exposure.
Thank you very much. See, this is why I don't do this on a daily basis. This is why Anne-Marie's in charge of this stuff, because she's much better at it than me. So now we go, if we do synchronize, we'll basically see that those settings have been applied to this image as well. So the other thing you'll notice is at the bottom here, when you make those changes, you'll see in the thumb strip, you've got that exposure little icon pops up here, which shows you that you've changed something about the image. So those are the main things that we then do to kind of make sure that our settings are all good. And then finally, we'll go through and actually rate our images. So if I go back to my collection, and if I show you those headshots, typically what we'll do is we'll go through, look at the images. So if we look at these ones here, whoops, I'm clicking on the wrong thing here. Yeah.
Press done.
Oh, thank you. See, again, it's good to have somebody who knows what they're doing next to you. What we'll do is we'll go through the images and we'll put a 1 rating, and we do that just by pressing the numbers against the images that we are basically happy with. And when I say basically happy, what we mean is things like, are they in focus? Is the lighting good? Is the composition of the shot okay? All of that good stuff. And if the answer is yes, we'll give it a 1. And once I've done that, I can click on my filters here, and it will just show me all the shots that are a 1. The next thing we'll do is go through and see if there are ones that are really, kind of stand out to us. So out of that session where we took up, 392 images, our first pass, we got it down to 198. We'll then go through to a second pass of images for the ones that are really kind of stand out to us, things that, where we think that they make a really nice portrait or something along those lines, and so forth. And then we'll rate those a 2. And then finally, if we're going to perhaps go to print these images, or if we're going to, if it was a portrait client and they came in and they went through and they selected the images that they might want to purchase, we'll give them a different rating, a higher rating, maybe a 3 or maybe a 5. The other thing we often do, and you'll notice we've got colors here, is sometimes me and Anne-Marie will decide, oh, which picture do I like and which picture does she like? And we'll use a color. So I might be red, which would be like number 6. And she might be green, which should be, off the top of my head, number 8. There, well, she knows. So that way, it's a great way of, we can keep the star rating, which is essentially, I guess, the core quality of the image, but we can then use the colors as yet another way of differentiating who likes what. So I can have everything here in my filter that's 2 stars or greater. And if I click on red, now it will just show me those ones that maybe I picked. So it's a great way of just giving you different mechanisms to filter your images out, so you can really focus on the stuff that kind of gets you most excited in editing, or you want to post on your website or your social media, etc. So that's the core stuff we wanted to discuss when it came to sort of selecting your images. Like I say, we've got a few slides on that, which give you a few more options. Although there is one other thing I forgot. There is the flag button. So that's a bit more binary than using the star rating system. So flag, you press the P button, or U to remove a flag or to unflag something. And if you want to reject images, i.e. throw out all of the images that were out of focus, or where the lighting was wrong or something like that, kind of the opposite, you can use the X key as to reject those images. So When it comes to culling, sorting your images, there are a few different methodologies. I like the star rating system, but you can use either the star rating or the pick filter button or the flag button, whichever kind of works best for you. Great. So I think that kind of covers all of those key points. And like I say, we've got a few slides on here as to remind you. Also, as well, there's a link to the Adobe shortcuts. So I'm not very good at shortcuts, but basically ratings and picking are probably the limit of my shortcut knowledge. But to be fair, if you really get into Lightroom, they're a great way to kind of improve your speed of going through your work and all that kind of good stuff. So without further ado,
there's a question.
Okay.
Yes, the question is, how can you batch process a set of files? Is this with the sync function?
It is, yes. So that's a great question. And again, probably a bit more advanced for what we wanted to talk about today, but you can also apply filters, and filters basically allow you to put together a whole kind of recipe of different settings and changes that you want to apply to your images. So exactly that, yes. So sync is a great way of doing that kind of batch processing. So I know people say who are wedding photographers, and they have, say, some different kind of image filters that they'll apply. And yes, exactly that, by grabbing a bunch of images from that session, maybe it could be the dance session or the ceremony session, you can apply that range of different effects and different settings to your images to batch process. So thank you, Lisa. Great question. Awesome. Any more, or is it time for you?
Oh, I think it is. I think it is.
Okay, I'll hand over. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. We'll swap seats. I'll let you have a nice seat.
Oh, thank you very much.
That's a
And more importantly, that gives me a chance to have a bit of coffee.
Hello there. Right, so if you were confused by any of that, that's perfectly fine. We are going to have this up on the Streatham Festival website, but I will send the link to everybody who's come today. And Streatham Festival, this is what this workshop is brought to you by. I don't think Mark mentioned that, he just went straight in there.
That's my bad, sorry folks.
Hence it's free, and we'll be doing some more in the future. Today's the last day of the Streatham Festival, but let's get into the basic editing. So we haven't exported images yet. Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, so let us go into our pre-prepared Lightroom workshop collection. So I'm not sure that is the right one. Hang on. There we go. That's the right one. Okay, so Mark already synced this image. So I picked this image because it'd be a good one to demonstrate cropping and spot removal, etc. So previously we were working in Library, but make sure that you click on Develop to start editing. So here is Georgia, lovely young lady. So once you click onto Develop, you'll see these tools. This one here is Crop Overlay. This one, Spot Removal. This one, Red Eye Correction. This one, Graduated Filter. And this one, Adjustment Brush. Basically, I call them all thingy. I'm going to go and press the thingy. So I will use the correct terminology today. So crop. So this, to crop your image, you just grab the edge of the crop tool, pull in. If you want a landscape, just pull it out like that. Move your image up. And there you go. You'll get a crop like that. When you click on the crop tool again, you'll see this come up here, original, which is the original aspect ratio. If you click these two arrows down here, you'll see various options come up. So for example, if you wanted to do a print, a 5x7 print, if you click here, this will turn into the correct aspect ratio. If, for example, you want this on Instagram and you like your square images, if you click 1x1, that'd be a square for you. Or if you wanted to do custom, just enter custom and you enter the dimensions that you require. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this as shot, and I'm going to do a tight crop so we can demonstrate the spot removal. So there, done. Click on done when you're finished. Oh, do you know what? I'm going to move that over a bit. That's not, there we go. Done. So if you scroll down here, you've got your exposure. So maybe, I don't know, what do you think? Shall we brighten them up a bit? There we go. Shadows, maybe to show up the background a bit. So I'm gonna pull in, oops, there we go. Lightens the background a bit and basically all the shadows. Highlights here, if I go all the way down, you could see that affects the highlights, pulls all the highlights down. If it goes all the way up here, highlights up. Say, for example, if you put it here, you think, oh my goodness me, what have I done? All you have to do with all of these is just double click and it will put it back to the default position. So I'm going to leave that on the default position. And let's say we're happy with that. So to zoom in, you could either click here, 100%. That's 50%. But if you want to manually go in further, just press Command and plus. What would that be on a PC, Mark?
Probably
Control.
Control.
Okay, yeah. Right. So, and then Command and plus again, because what I'm trying to show you here are slight blemishes that we're going to get rid of. So this here, as I said earlier, this is the spot removal tool. So we click on here and we make sure that it's on heal. So you'll see there's heal and there's clone. The healing tool takes into account the colors and textures and blends everything together, as opposed to the clone tool that will copy exactly the detail from the borrowed source. So I'll show you what I mean. So I've clicked on that. Hang on, no, I've clicked off it now, here we go. And you see this, can you see this here? This controls the size. So if you wanted it a little bit smaller, just down a bit. Feather, make sure the feather is quite high because we don't want it hard on the edges. And then we just click on there, highlight, and hopefully this is, there you go, this is the source, it's picked. So say it goes over here, let's give an example, because sometimes it does crazy things and it puts some eyebrow up here. All you do is you just move it to a matching source. Let's, shall we say, hang on, let's put it here. There we go. And click done. And there we go. So if we go all the way around and do that, see there's some more blemishes here. So spot removal tool, click. Hopefully it will go on the, there we go, that's gone. Click. And this here in the navigator area, you could move this around to different areas. So we'll just click on here. There we go. And little dry patch here. There we go. And let's check, don't want to get rid of her freckles, just the blemishes. So click on there. Whoopsie, it's gone in the wrong place. So we just drag that and it copies the source there. And then we press done. So if we put that on fit, actually, let's see if we can, Command minus minus. so you can see the difference. So if you press the back space bar, no, that's not true, backslash, you can see before, that's your image before, and that's after. And if you want to see it side by side, there's these two here. Just click on this and it'll give you a side by side example of before and after. So to click off that, just click on there. Now, she's not smiling, but if she was, would go into the adjustment brush, which is here, which has a range of different adjustment brushes. What we've got here is teeth whitening. So you would click on here and then, do you know what? Just a little tiny bit of teeth that's there. I'm going to like demonstrate it. So teeth whitening, let's go down. You see the size of the brush is here and the details, the feather and the flow. So we make it as small as possible. Well, that's small, isn't it? Right, okay. And then Command plus plus. We're just gonna, if we click on there, the adjustment brush specifies an area basically that you want to use. And you'll see the mask overlay here. It's currently not on, but if I clicked it on, you'll see exactly where your brush is going, as opposed to going blind like that. So here we go. Put the mask back on so we can see. Maybe I should have picked a picture with more toothy grin, but there we go.
Anne-Marie, now I'm going to ask a question.
Yes,
and
done.
Let's say my masking goes a bit wild, you know, I have a slip of the finger or something. Can you unmask or sort of delete it without taking the whole thing off?
Yes, you can. So let's use the teeth whitening for an example, and I'll put the mask on so you can see. And there I am, just in a way, and then, oh, dearie me. Oh, what happened? Oh, dearie me. So basically, you click on Option. What would that be on a PC?
Oh, I don't know.
Right, okay. So whatever, Alt, yes. Probably, and then just rub out your mistake. There we go. There we are.
Awesome.
Yeah. To delete something that you've done, you just click on your adjustment dot there and press backspace. There you go, and it disappears. So I'm going to click on done when I finished. Another thing that you could do with this image is skin soften, which I don't use on Lightroom anymore. I used to, now I use Photoshop. But let's have a look. So again, you click on your adjustment brush, click on your little arrows, you'll see a range of options here, and you will see soften skin. Just click on that. And as you could see there, this here, that's the teeth whitening, that's a little dot there. And we want to soften the skin. So let's make that bit bigger. Let's go in a bit so you can, oops, the daisy, it's a bit much, right, okay. And click on Show Selected Mask Overlay. And we're gonna soften the skin area. There we go. Like that. Again, make sure it's feathered, otherwise it's gonna be a bit hard on the face. There we go, let's just do that bit there. Okay, and then press done. Actually, you know what, let me just take the mask off so you can see. There we go, done. Again, before and after. There we go, and then we just click over there. And fit, there we go. So that's just, you know, some of the basic things that you could do with a portrait. Other things that we can do is with things like this. So this was taken next door at the Streatham pumping station. Again, that was part of the Streatham Festival. They let us in after probably about 5 years of asking. People came around and had a look at this building that it was built in 1894, very elaborate. So basically what happened was Mark was trying to take an exposure that showed the detail in the architecture, but also had a bit of the exterior environment. So he took 2 photos, this one and this one, but didn't quite nail it. So let's see which picture is better to try and get a more balanced image. So let's start with this one, for example. So back to our area here, scroll up. So what we can do, we can like pull the exposure up. Then you see what's happening here, you're losing the outside. So we can pull the shadows to brighten it up. But the highlights here, that's the thing that's gonna help with getting the detail back. There you go. So there you have it. Maybe up. There we go. The exposure bit. Let's do a before and after. Before and after. There we go. So that's how we solve that issue. Then this one with the opposite problem. Again, highlights, blown out a bit. So we go to highlights and pull that all the way down. Then you can start seeing the trees outside. So maybe just contrast, make it a bit more interesting. But what I find interesting about these 2 images is they're both as shot here. This is to do with the white balance here, where you have various options, auto, daylight, cloudy, etc., as Mark said before. But this one is a bit yellow. And this one is more how the image actually was. So say you wanted to have this image, sorry, I beg your pardon, this image, the same white balance as that image. We go into this image. Notice the temperature is 4550 here. So this is the cools down here, the blue, and then it gets warmer and warmer. And this is a completely different number. It's a lot warmer, 5600. Basically, we go here, click on the temperature, copy, go back into the other image. So with the temperature here, click on that, Command and V, and there you have it. The temperature is the same as that one. So there we go. I actually think the dark room is better actually with the
Yes, I think it kind of gives a slightly better balance.
yeah.
But it is interesting how much you can recover.
Yeah. So hang on. So this was going to be a test. There we go. This was going to be a test to say, what do you think this is? But we already know what it is, but it looks like a picture that you could just like throw away. What on earth happened there? Mark took a picture outside our studio. So let's go into crop, get rid of this bit here. There we go. And we are going to get a lot of lost information out from here. So there is a wonderful tool called dehaze, but let's just show you what happens when you bring the exposure down. You get some detail coming back and contrast. That's one way of getting your detail back. So I'm just going to reset this by double clicking on contrast and double clicking on exposure. And I'm just going to demonstrate what dehaze does. And what dehaze does, it fixes haze by highlighting, heightening the overall contrast of the photo. It's perfect for bringing out the details of landscapes where distant objects look washed out. So you can tell that I was reading that.
Luckily, the microphone's in the way.
So let's go to dehaze. Yay. So there we go. Look at that. The Simpsons. There you go. Very Simpsons type. So that's a bit extreme, isn't it? So let's bring it down a bit. There we go. So there's a whole heap of hidden cloud and sky in the background there. And that's what the dehaze does. Yes, here's another image that we took. Where are we? Here. Let me again just show you how extremely dull and boring this looked initially. Again, this is the Streatham pumping station next door to us. We are over here, if you care to give us a visit at some point. And so yeah, it's a bit dull. So we're gonna like up the exposure, which is here, a bit here, up a bit of contrast, a bit of contrast there. There we go. Shadows, a bit dark here, so we're gonna drag them up. There we go, brighten it up a bit. And we're gonna do the dehaze thing. So hang on. Oh, here we go. There's some detail in the sky coming out. I mean, that's one way of doing it. You're actually dehazing the whole entire picture here. But if you wanted to just dehaze the upper part, let's get rid of that. So again, I'm going to double click to put it back to default and go to the graduated filter. Click here. So it says soften skin. I don't want to do that. I want to dehaze. So I'm going to click on dehaze. There we go. And whoopsie daisy, where am I going? Whoop, there you go, just over the sky a bit. You could see a bit of dehazing going on. And then you go to the dehaze, which is set 25 at the minute. So let's, if we bring that in, a bit of detail in there. And done. Maybe brighten it up a bit, I don't know. There we go. There we go. There's lots you could do with this picture. Yeah, that's just the basics, basically. Yeah, I think that covers the basics, Mark.
Yes, excellent. So there's one last bit for you.
Yeah.
Oops, if I can get my slides back. Whoa, I've messed up Lightroom again. Oops. There we go.
Marvelous.
Oops. Exporting.
Exporting your images. Okay. So basically, once you finish doing your editing, you need to export your images, i.e. turn them into JPEGs and into the right size that you require. So let's go on to, shall I do a demonstration here?
Please do.
Yeah, okay.
Again, you do this all the time for me.
So thank you. So let me just do,
yeah, let's go and say some of George's or something like that.
okay. There we go. So I don't know, what should we pick?
Where are all our twos?
Yeah, that'll do. That's a 2. Like, again, another thing we could like sort out, but I'm exporting an image just to show you.
Go with some 3s then. I'll raise you.
Okay, 3s. There we go. Okay, so file. This is what we do to export an image. Export.
Yes.
There we go. And then we, oopsie daisy, let me cancel that because we've got some clients on there. Let's just like put in for workshop. There we go. So basically you choose where you want to put your file. Then you scroll down. Go. So resize to fit. Longest edge, 1,500. That's sort of social media size, isn't it? Hang on, you can change the name as well. Let me show you that. Okay. So this is called Georgia Test at the moment, but if I want to rename it, I will call this custom name. And there we go. We're going to put this as
Workshop.
Workshop. There we go. And basically, I should stop saying basically, export. So at the moment up here, you can see it's exporting one image. Hey, there we go. It's exported one image. And then that will be saved. Hang on, let's see.
I think it's saved in the client folder, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, it is saved. Trust me.
Yeah. One thing I was going to mention. So if you highlight a few images, because I think one thing that always gets me is I click on export and then it just does one image. But I wanted to export like 3 images.
Okay.
So run us through that.
So if you want to, for example, all 3, or if there's hundreds like we normally do, you click on one image like that, Command and A to highlight, make sure everything is highlighted. And then we go into same thing, File, Export, or if you're happy with where it was exported before, export with previous. But if you do export, and then you could go into where exactly you wanted to save it.
But the other thing I was going to mention is the thing that catches me out is if you have a look at the top there, it tells you how many it's exporting.
There you go. So that's how you export images. Are there any questions?
Greg's mentioned I want to use a plugin such as Helicon. How would I install to Lightroom? That's a really interesting question.
Let's do a swap. That's okay. A technical question.
So when it comes to plugins, I'll be honest, I don't know Helicon specifically, but one plugin that we do have is we have a Canon printer. So I'm not sure if I've got it set up on this particular machine, but basically, first things first, you've got plugin manager, which tells you what plugins you've got. So you can click in add, and then you can find a plugin, etc., and it will pull that plugin in. But basically, once you've got your plugins in there, you go into plugin extras, and then that's where you can use those plugins to update your images. So like I say, Helicon is not one I know specifically, but if it is a Lightroom supported plugin, that's where you would access it and how you'd access it. Another thing that's also worth mentioning is under photo, you have the option of editing your images with other applications. So we mentioned things like how Lightroom and Photoshop can be used together to kind of give you that kind of next level of image manipulation. This is basically how you do that. So from Lightroom, for example, and let's pick, say, on a color image here. You know, a tool that we use a lot is Silver FX Pro. And if I go to edit in, and you'll find Silver FX Pro as an option. It asks me a couple of things. I want to bring in the Lightroom adjustments and so forth. I can click on yes and edit, and then that's external program will fire up and it will pull in that image. And then I can use that to apply the capabilities and the settings of Silver FX Pro on my Lightroom image. Now it's taken a few seconds to load up. And I realize we're a few minutes over time. So if that doesn't load up shortly, hopefully you'll take my word for it. But, that's another great way of kind of adding extra capabilities to what Lightroom can do. And the other key thing is,
Close it down and start again with that. If you close that and then open it up again.
Sorry, it's a bit of a... No, it won't let me close it.
Yeah, you're going to have to force close that one.
Okay. Again, this is when you find the workshop gremlins. Right, quit. Go back in here. So is it worth me trying that again, Anne-Marie? Okay, we'll go for the big finale. Where is it? I can't see it. Looking, editing. So we'll do that one more time. This time with feeling. There we go. So it's pulled my image in. And like I say, we can then go through and see the different black and white effects that we've got here with Silver FX Pro. And if I find one that I like, so this high structure, again, I can apply a few modifications and changes and so forth here, etc. Blah, blah, blah. And then once we've done that, if I click save, it will basically bring that image back into Lightroom. It will be a TIFF now, as opposed to being the original raw file. But now it's pull that image back into Lightroom, and I can, again, do my Lightroom stuff. I could crop it, I could change it with Lightroom, etc. But as we've said, because we're not working with the raw now, we won't have this perhaps as much flexibility for some of the other capabilities that we have when we're working purely with the raw. So I'm grateful for everybody who stayed with us. We were a little bit over time, but if you haven't been able to, obviously we'll have the recording that's available to share.
So we'd like to encourage people to donate to the Norwood Food Bank. There we go. Hang on, is that the one?
Yeah. So we are doing some not in promotion, but we're just trying to spread the word about our local food bank. So for those of you in the UK, there's the Norwood and Brixton Food Library or Food Bank, sorry. So if you have the ability to make a donation, it'd be great to help them with all the great work they're doing at the moment. And like I said, there's a link here in the chat. So just to recap, we covered the differences between Lightroom and Photoshop, how you can get hold of Lightroom, the subscription options, bringing images into Lightroom, organizing your images, some file management, and why it's important to do file management in Lightroom rather than in your typical Explorer or Finder operating system ways of managing files. How you can synchronize settings when you bring files in. Some ways that we use to decide and cull and rate our images so we know which ones to work on specifically. And finally, Anne-Marie covered some of the basic imaging capabilities in Lightroom, and then how to export your finished image at the end. So we hope you found that useful. If there are any last questions, please feel free to either unmute and ask your question or ask it in the chat. Okay, we'll give it a sec. Are there any last questions? But if not, obviously, hope that was useful. Again, feel free to reach out to us. Like I say, our website is ldnphotography.com, and more importantly, we're part of Ion Streatham, which is the photography strand of the Streatham Festival. We have an Instagram for Ion Streatham, which is at Ion Streatham. So please, if you found today helpful or you have any questions, again, feel free to reach out to us either via Instagram or directly at LDN Photography. And if not, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, all the international people here as well.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone.
Excellent. Marvelous. Well, we'll hopefully see you in our next workshop. Scooching.
Bye.
Bye.